Hi, this morning I'm going to show you how to change a water pump on a Mercedes C230, and we're going to change the water pump. You see that this is a 1998, and it's pretty easy to get to on this if you get the cameraman to come up here close. When you look in here, there's quite a bit of space between the radiator and the fan shroud and the water pump. This is the water pump right here that we're going to replace, and so there's a lot of space to work with. Again, this is a 98. Over here I have a 99 C230, and it's got basically the same engine on it, but unfortunately they've added, I don't know if it was emissions or what they added, but you see that the space between the radiator shroud and where the water pump is a lot closer. So this is a little more difficult to work with. You'll have to deal with this radiator fan and getting it out, and the overflow tube and everything. So this is a 99 compressor, and it's a little more difficult to work with. Basically it's going to be one of the same issues. And then this is a 2000 we've got over here, and it's even a little more cramped. So you got a 2000 over here, and it's got a bigger fan on it, and then behind the fan is the water pump. So this one deals, the others just have the belt attachment hooked right to the water pump. On this one, there's the fan hooked to here, and then it's also hooked to the water pump. So this is a little more difficult to do on the 2000s. So let's get started on the replacing the water pump. For the draining the radiator, you do need to take the cap off of the overflow tank, and what that does is it allows air to get in, so there's no vacuum. If you leave this on when we're down below and we open up that red valve, you won't get anything come out because there's a vacuum, and you have to have air come in. So you open up make sure your engine's cold. Obviously, when you do this, you don't want to do this on a hot engine. So this is set overnight and the engine's cold. So we open this up, it allows the air to get in, and then the fluid can drain out of the radiator properly. Just came from the gym, so I'm in our workout clothes. But the first thing you want to do is, some of these originally came with a bottom plate, protection plate, and you want to take that plate off. That's a really easy job with the four little machine bolts that hold it on. So you want to remove that. The next thing you want to do is you need to drain the radiator. And so we're going to go down underneath, down here, and I don't know if you may want to come over to this side to see, but I don't know if you can see it or not, but there's a red plug right here, and it just takes a screwdriver and you put that on it and turn counterclockwise. But what I like to do is get this tubing, and I put this tube on it that just slides right over it. It's a let's see, it's a number 4 tubing, and I get about 2 feet of it, and I hook it on this nipple right here. There's a nipple that's right there, so this just goes right over the nipple, and then I slide the tube down into here, and I have a recovery tank over here that we drain the radiator into. So that when you loosen this, when you turn this counterclockwise, the radiator fluid will leak out and follow this tube into here, and you'll get very little drippage on the floor of your garage or wherever you're working. Once you've drained that, you can put this plug back in, screw it back clockwise, just snug. You don't want to make it too tight. It's plastic, you can break it, and then take the tube off, and we're done with this. So we're gonna push that aside, and we're gonna recover that when we're ready to fill the radiator back up again. So now let's go back up top. Now when you drain the radiator, the radiator fluid will drain from the bottom of the radiator, and so any fluid up above where the radiator is will drain out. Unfortunately, the water pump is right here, and when we remove this water pump, there's going to be some water that doesn't make it up over the return point here. Here's a return point. I've already loosened that. You can see that it slipped off. And the return point is here. So when we're going to remove this water pump, and when we do, there'll be some radiator fluid that gushes out. So we need to be careful. So the next thing you need to do is you need to remove the belt, the serpentine belt. And this serpentine belt looks pretty old. We're gonna probably have to replace that belt as well. So this is what's called the idler pulley, and it's got a shock absorber on it that gives it tension. It's the tensioner pulley, and it tensions the belt. So let me get the proper the proper wrench here. This is a number 10. It's an E10 Torx, reverse Torx. You can see that. And so I put that on the end of a wrench, and you just put it on the end of this cap, and as you push counterclockwise, you'll see that it'll push against this spring or the shock absorber, and you'll ease the tension. So now you just slide the belt off of the pulley or the tensioner, and then you can let go of it, and now the belt's loose. It's that simple. Now with these older Mercedes, the 1998, you'll notice that the belt, it goes all the way across, and then it goes all the way down. So it comes up here from your alternator, it comes up to the water pump, up to the power steering pump, down to the air conditioning compressor, and then back around to the crankshaft, and then it loops around the idler or the tensioner pulley, and then back down to the alternator. So that's the way that it's going to go, and that's the way we're going to put back. One of the tricks that I've learned is with the new digital cameras is to take a picture of it. If you're unsure on how it's going to go back, take a picture of it ahead of time, and then when you need to reassemble it, if you're unsure of how the serpentine belt goes, you can use the picture as a reference. So now we're just going to lift the serpentine belt off and pull it out, and we're going to examine the belt out around the drive shaft. We're examining the belt, and you'll see that this belt is frayed. There's some fraying here and some breakage, so that's not good here. And then when you flip it over and you look, you see these little cracks in the belt. So this belt should be replaced. You don't want to be stranded. This one belt runs everything on these Mercedes, and so if you're out in the boondocks and this thing breaks, you're in big trouble. So it's a good idea to replace these at the same time if it's showing wearing and cracking, as this one is. Pretty bad. I've seen worse, but that's pretty bad. All right, the next thing we want to do is on the water pump itself, there's a little pulley that the drive belt hooks to. It's grooved here, and there's 4 little bolts right here that hook it to the water pump. And it's pretty easy to get off if you know the trick. What happens is if you put a wrench here and you try to turn this, then this will spin, and that's not good. So you put a screwdriver. What I usually do is I put a screwdriver under these two bolts like this, and then I put a wrench on this other side, a socket on this other side, and I break it loose, and then I can get this to come out. And you do that. You don't take it all the way out. Just loosen it enough. As you break these loose, then you'll see that they're not in there very tight, or they shouldn't have been put in there very tight, or they could. But break them loose, and then they will just come out by hand. Loosen them all 4 of them while you got the bolts in there. Loosen all 4 of them like that, and then they should just come right out with your hand. So you can. I'm going to take those 4 out. we can cut the camera. I'll just off of that pulley on the water pump. What I want to do is just kind of tap it and coax it loose. And if you tap it, this is just a rubber mallet. You can usually just get it to come right off of there. Kind of awkward to get into, but it'll just pull. It should just pull forward. And this one's being a little bit stubborn. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spray a little WD-40 down in there and let it sit for a second to alleviate some of the rust that's there. This is the old water pump right here that we're going to take off, and so we're not going to use that anymore. We're just going to throw it away. I might want to put a screwdriver in there and pry. But in the meantime, you can see that I've loosened this hose clamp right here that goes into here, comes from the engine into the water pump, and I'm going to slide that back. We're going to take this hose off. Over here there's a hose clamp. I've loosened that hose clamp, and I'm just going to let that drop, and then I'm going to pull this hose off. I had to use a screwdriver earlier to coax it to break the seal, and then it slipped off. And then back here there's another hose. I don't know if you can see it or not. Back here there's another hose that this is just clamps. Just a clamp instead of a screw on. It's just use pliers to get that one off. So I'm going to get some pliers, put underneath here, squeeze that clamp, and then I'll slide this off as well. Okay, I sprayed some WD-40 on this thing. I sprayed WD-40 right here, and then I sprayed WD-40 in the little holes. And then I took my mallet and just tapped on it a little bit, and you see that that thing just came right off. So it comes off, exposing the water pump. And now all we have to do is there's bolts around here, here, and down here. I think there's 6 or 8 of them that we need to take off, and then this water pump will just come right out. The water pump will just pull right forward out. We may have to coax it a little bit. Some water pumps you have to use Loctite, the form a gasket, and others come with their own gasket, and they don't have you use that. But in either case, we'll see which one this one was in just a minute. Okay, now that I got the pulley off of here, I'm going to show you that there's 8 screws. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 that come off. I usually use gloves on this, but once we work that loose, we can worry about these hoses that are. I've loosened the clamps off these hoses. You can see I've loosened the clamps off of those down below, and the one up above is already off. There's the clamp up on the hose, and then this one is loose over here. You can see that it's loose. As we loosen this and it pulls out, then we can worry about those hoses. They're not on very, these bolts are not on very tight. They're just on snug, so as not to breach the gasket or squeeze out any of the Forma gasket that's there. So one of the things that I use is I have an air wrench here that I'm going to use to take those 8 bolts off, because it can be pretty tedious. Now they are different sizes, so you need to remember where they go. So one of the tricks that I do is I take the new pump. Where did I put the new pump? Oh, here's the new pump that I'm going to use. So what I do is I lay the pump down in the same orientation that I'm going to take that old one out of. So I lay the pump down like that, and then as I take the bolts out, I'm going to lay the bolts down around the circumference of this new one as I lay them down, so that as I pull them off, I'll put them down here. so that when I put them on, I'll know exactly which ones to put on and where. So I'm going to use that air wrench. It's pretty noisy. I'll show you maybe one or two that I'm taking out, and then once I get them out, we'll refilm from there. This makes it a lot easier than doing it by hand. It's the same E10 socket that we used to relieve the tension on the tensioner pulley. So we're going to get those off and then we'll rejoin. Okay, we're by Sky Harbor Airport, and this is a popular time for jets taking off. You'll notice that Pete, as he takes the bolts out, he's laying them around the circumference of the new water pump so that we'll know where they go when we put them back, and there's no confusion as to which bolt goes where. So we're going to continue here. We'll check back in a few minutes. Okay, for these last two bolts right here, it takes a bigger head. We're going to switch to it's an E12 head for these last two bolts. Hold on. Now you notice the water's starting to seep out. We're going to want to get or the fluid's starting to seep out. We want to get our thing under there to catch it. And so as much of that as we can, we want to recycle. So you know you're getting close when the water starts dripping out like that. Okay, we've got them all laid out. Remember that the first 6 of them required an E10, and the last 2 required an E12 to get them out, and you'll see that they're much longer than that. And we're getting a pretty good flow of excess radiator fluid out of the engine. So now this thing should just break loose, and you'll hear it gush. See the water just gush out? Yeah. Okay, so now that it's loose, we can take off that final hose right there and take off that hose right there, and then we're ready to prepare to put our new one on. Okay, we got the old one out of Pete's car here. I'm going to have him spin it, and you can feel how tough it is. Now lay it down in the same orientation as the new one. So pull the new one up and place the old one down there so that we know exactly where the screws are going to go. Now spin the new one. Can you feel the difference? Significantly different, isn't it?
There's no resistance.
Right. Okay, so now we're going to prep to put that new one in. So the thing that we have to look for is to see if the old one is held on by a gasket, or if it was held on by Loctite. And in some cases, the old gasket might be good enough that we just want to wipe it off and use it. And it looks like that old gasket is actually pretty good. I'm not sure if we want to. The new one came and it says to use form a gasket. I'm kind of debating what to do here. If you're going to use form a gasket, you take a razor blade and you scrape that old one off. And then you use form a gasket to put the new one on. So we might talk about it here and decide what to do. Okay, the new water pump came with a gasket. So what Pete's doing is he's prepping the old one by taking a razor blade and going to scrape the old one off of there. And we're going to get the surface clean so that the new one will fit on. So the new one came with a gasket. We're going to prep the surface to put the new gasket on. You see that Pete's scraping it with a razor blade to pull the old one off. And once we get it ready, we'll put the new gasket on, and we'll be ready to go. put the new one on and put it back together. All right, this is the new gasket that's going to go on here like that, and then this is going to adhere to the engine. And everybody kind of has their own little method of doing this. Some people use the gasket without any supplement. What I like to do is I like to use the Forma gasket 2 non-hardening sealant. And sorry about the airplanes going over. Again, we live close to Sky Harbor. So I like to take a little bit of this. Depends on how squeamish you are. You can put on these latex gloves if you want. And then what you do is, this is non-hardening, so just take a little bit of this and kind of apply it to both sides of this paper. Just give it a little coating like that. Now again, this is kind of, each person has their own little method of doing this. You may not want to do this, but it's up to you. So I like to coat the gasket. It also gives it a little bit of adhesion so that it'll stick to the surface of the pump and also to the engine, so that you won't get it dropping off very often. So now we're gonna put that back on here like that. Now what we want to do is we want to feed through a couple bolts to get it to adhere to the engine, and then just to get it to snug up, and then we'll put the rest of the bolts back, and then we'll tighten them down. Again, we don't want to tighten them very tight because we're using this gasket that will form a seal. So we'll cut that, and then we'll come back once we get it hooked. Okay, we're getting this assembled, but it turns out that our picture, we got these two, when we set these down, we got these two flipped around, and the long one should go here, and this is a shorter one here. So where we laid them out in the diagram, they should be reversed. I'll go back and point that out. But now we are reassembling it. We're putting the hoses back on, as you see here, and then we're gonna put the clamps back on. So that hose is on, and we're gonna put this hose on here. Now that those hoses are back on, we'll tighten up these. We just want to snug them up. You don't want to make them too tight. And then we'll go from there. All right, we're tightening the screws back up again. I don't recommend using a power wrench to do that, because there's a touch and a feel to these. You don't want to get them really, really snug, too tight, or it won't be good for the gasket. So what I'm having Pete do is he's tightening them, and then he's going to skip over one, and then he's going to tighten another one and skip over another one, and make the rounds that way. That way you get them alternately tight around the circumference, and then come back, kind of like when you do your tires. So okay, Pete's got those 8 bolts snugged up around the circumference of the water pump. We've got the hoses and the clamps back on, back in place and back on. And now we're going to put the pulley back on so that the serpentine belt will be able to pull. So he's going to put that on, do one bolt at a time. Pull it back off. All right, we're ready to put the pulley back on. So what you do is you put the pulley on and feed one bolt through and get that one bolt started, and then that'll guide you to get the other bolts on. So get the other 4 bolts, put them in their respective holes, tighten them down as close as you can get it with your hand, and then we're going to use the same trick we used to get them loose with the screwdriver and with the wrench in just a few minutes. Okay, so now we're going to use the screwdriver to help tighten these as well. So what we're going to do is you want to tighten them, but if you try to tighten these using a wrench, it's going to spin on us, right? So we get one on, and we're going to get them all cinched down to where they're up against it. I'll use this other hand so you can see. So you get them tightened down by hand so that they're there, and then we're going to, as we tighten these, maybe this is the other way. Yeah, this is flip the other way. Get it as tight as you can get it now, without using the screwdriver. So we're going to get them. Get them on there. Okay. Now what we want to do is we want to put some pressure the other way, put our screwdriver in the opposite way like this, so that when we can now apply pressure that way. And you want to snug these up too. So snug them that way, use a screwdriver as a pry to hold it so it doesn't rotate, and get all four of them snugged up. All right, so that's our new water pump. We got that on, and it's turning free. We got all the bolts snugged down, got these back on. We tightened the bolt back on down below, and so now we're going to put on the new serpentine belt. All right, we went down to a local AutoZone and bought a Dayco serpentine belt, poly-ribbed, to go back on to replace that worn out one that was already on there. So here's the part number. You just tell them it's for a '98 Mercedes C230. They should be able to pull it up on your computer. We paid a couple dollars extra to get the better one. So we got the belt out. We hope it's the same length here. So the way that it goes back on is you're gonna first come down around the alternator down here like this, and then it goes up around the water pump. It goes around the power steering pump, then it goes down around the air conditioner, and then it's going to go down around the crankshaft pulley like this, and then it's going to come back. It's going to come back to the take-up pulley like this, okay, to the tensioner pulley. You want to make sure that all the grooves are in. Everything's in the groove like this, and then I'm gonna ask Pete to hold that while I go get the E10. We can cut it. Okay, we're back. We've got our E10 back on here. We've got these routed around. I'm adding tension to it, and so now I'm going to let go of the tension, and it's back on. Want to make sure that the belt is in all the grooves. So I'm checking the water pump, the alternator. It comes back around the pulley. Is it on the drive shaft, which gives us the powers this whole belt, and then back onto the air conditioning. Here's the air conditioning. It's in the grooves, and then back up on the power steering. So we got our new serpentine belt on, and we're ready now to filter the fluid and pour it back in our engine. All right, what we're going to do is now we've got the coolant ready to pour back in. Now if you look, we got all this crud that dropped in from our engine, and we don't want that to go back in. So what we're going to do is, as we add it back in, I've got an old t-shirt here, and I'm going to put the t-shirt on here as a filter to filter out that gross stuff that's in there. I'm going to have Pete pour it back in here, and it'll filter it out, and we'll recoup most of our coolant. Now there's some loss based on, see what dripped down around under the engine. We're going to have to clean that up, but so we lost a little bit. So we're going to have to add some new, but we're going to recoup most of what we what we drained out of there. So, okay, we poured it back in. You can see some of the gross stuff that we filtered out that would have got in there if we didn't filter it. And then we left a little bit down inside the tank that we're not going to use. We're not going to use that part. So we're going to have to add a little bit of fluid once we get this going. Now, one of the things that this antifreeze is pretty slick stuff, so you want to wipe down any part of the engine where it's got on the belt, for example, because it could cause the belt to slip. But we're pretty fortunate, and we didn't have a lot of it get on the pulley parts. And because we replaced the belt, it's a new belt, and we're not going to have the issues. But it's a good idea to wipe off some of that before you start the car. So we're going to pull this thing down off. We're going to put the bottom plate on, pull this thing down off the jack stands, and then we'll start it, let it run for a minute, check the fluid to see how much we need to add, and then we're good to go. Okay, I'm going to have Pete start the car, and we're going to look for leaks and any odd noises, slippage of the belt, anything like that. The water that was in the engine got drained out, remember, and so now we're going to start the engine, so the water pump will now pump water through, and we're going to see how much fluid we have to add. All right. Good thing is it's quiet. No noise like the old one used to have. You can see this new belt is running fine. Everything looks good. We'll let it run some of the water through here. And then we'll check the level of the fluid and see how much we need to add.